Avatar Meher
Over
Baba
to you.
ki.
Jai.
Three of Meher Baba's favorite couplets of Hafiz, a mystical Persian poet, befitting a fortunate slave, carry out every command of the master without any question of why and what. About what you hear from the master, never say it is wrong, because, my dear, the fault lies in your own incapacity to understand him. I am the slave of the master who has released me from ignorance. Whatever my master does is of the highest benefit to all concerned. Avatar Meher Baba
Meher
ki
Baba
jai.
ki jai.
I just wanted to add that this line is very, very, you know, touching. That it is our inability to understand. Uh, the fault lies in our own incapacity to understand Him. So there is God in the beyond state, and there are many things which we don't understand, but He has given us how to live life by our discourses. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. Baba, Jai Baba. So actually, you reminded me of something else that's been bothering me. In fact, I was talking to Mamaji before you joined. So actually, I've been analyzing what this region does in the month of Ramadan, and it's so disappointing to see that literal following of what they have. I mean, I don't know how much you know about these terms. There is something called sunnat. Sunnat means what was actually practiced by the prophet, and they do exactly what he did. And I was saying, I keep thinking that it probably is anachronistic. That is, it's not relevant to the time we live in anymore. Many things, right? And but they still do it just as it was done years ago. He said, I will not wear a clothing beyond the ankle. And if you notice, they don't the pants are shorter. He, I think, didn't have a mustache, and they don't have a mustache, but they have a beard, right? So a lot of this is exactly what the prophet did. And I used to think that, hey, that's so anachronistic, and is it even relevant in this day and age? What is the true intent of the prophet, which is Baba, by the way, and so on and so forth, right? But when we were reading these three things today, it just hit me that probably they are just doing the second one. How do you question it? Right? So they are just blindly following it because they give him they give him so much importance. They give the prophet so much importance, like we would to Baba. So who are we to question it, right? So it's a provocative topic. I don't want to indulge and get beaten up. I am in the wrong place to be even talking about it. Thankfully, this is not live and I'm not in a public pulpit. But I'll stop there. But I don't know whether you're making you're understanding the point I'm making.
No, we understand basically, even in the discourses, Baba has said that just following religious rituals or traditions without, relevance or without understanding. What I understood is that without understanding and without doing it from your heart
Yeah.
is only mechanical, and it has got no spiritual benefits.
Baba
Oh,
has
that.
very clearly clarified this, Karthik. Do
Mhm.
what I ask you to do. Don't do what I do. That's very clear.
Ah,
He-
yes. Thank you, Sanjay. Good point.
That very
Yes, it is.
clarifies.
Yes. Very good distinction. So, Ashok, even the point you made is confusing because at certain points he has said, just follow, just do just what I have told you to do. But I think Sanjay ji's point is brilliant. Don't do what I do because what I do is only something I know, and I'm doing it as part of my universal work. Just don't try to emulate me, uh, step for step, but follow what I tell you to do without questioning. Brilliant.
Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah, don't copy me. Follow
Yes.
me. Obey me, rather. He has said, obey me.
Yeah, just blindly obey him. I think
Yeah.
that's the message I should have for our Muslim brothers. Just follow what he said, not what he does. Brilliant. Thank you very much. On that beautiful note, on this holy month of Ramadan, let's get started. So, so yesterday we had a beautiful read. The topic was on understanding the different nature of sanskaras, and I hope everybody enjoyed the reading. We understood how thoughts become desires, and desires become actions, and when you indulge a thought with the feeling of joy or happiness, that is, think of the joy or happiness linked to the thought, that's when it converts itself to a desire, and that's when it also gets linked up or potentially creates more sanskaras, and then from there all hell breaks loose, or rather more sanskaras are created if you convert it to action. So the progression is clearly thoughts, and I mean thoughts, words, and deeds. But then in the example and the reading that we did yesterday, is it's basically mind, subtle world, then converting it to action grossly, right? We also understood quite a bit of how about sound, and the nature of sound being a gross manifestation of a thought, which was brilliant, and Om being the first sanskara, Om, Ahura, Amen, Amin, right? So I think we had an interesting day yesterday. Any thoughts before we get started? Questions? Ideas?
I think the only thought which comes to my mind is that this acronym LAGHPSJ:
Yep.
lust, anger, greed, hatred, pride, selfishness, and jealousy.
Jealousy.
I think we should just try to be away from all this as much as possible. Jai Baba.
Insha Baba.
Insha Baba, yes.
Regional influence. Okay, so let's get started. The chapter we are at is The Soul. The page number is 254. Avatar Meher Baba ki jai. The soul. Soul is equal to infinite intelligence. The soul is infinite intelligence, and once consciousness of the soul is attained, the state of self-realization is of being infinitely intelligent. When the soul is without sanskaras and does not think, it is God. The way to read it is, when the soul is without sanskaras and does not think, it is God. Infinite intelligence in latency in the beyond beyond. When the soul is without sanskaras and thinks of itself but not of creation, it is the perfect one, the Brahmibhut or the Majzub. I repeat, when the soul is without sanskaras and thinks of itself but not of creation, it is the perfect one, the Brahmibhut or the Majzub. Conscious God in the beyond, Vigyan. When the soul is without sanskaras and thinks of the self in the beyond and simultaneously in creation, I repeat, when the soul is without sanskaras and thinks of the self, big S, in the beyond and simultaneously in creation, it is the perfect master, the Sadguru or Kutub, the infinite real I using its infinite intelligence. When the soul thinks, but the mind is filled with sanskaras, then it is the ordinary man, the infinite false I in the state of the limited mind. The state of the infinite false I is also experienced by the subtle and mental conscious man, but on an unlimited scale. Kuber has infinite powers, Shiva has infinite thoughts, Kailasha has infinite longings. I'll repeat this last part. The state of the infinite false I is also experienced by the subtle and mental conscious man, but on an unlimited scale. Kubera has infinite powers, Shiva has infinite thoughts, and Kailasha has infinite longings. If you recollect, these were analogies that we learned in the second part of this book, Kubera, Shiva, and Kailasha, if I remember correctly. But I do not remember the exact analogy. If anybody remembers, please jump in and bring out those distinctions, as it will be helpful. Well, bad students. Let's continue. I think we should create a mnemonic or a slide about quite a bit of what we learned in this. Ashok, me and you should work on that. I think the many things that we learned in this are reusable if we create mnemonics, visualizations, and slides which help save it to memory, because we could go back to those and use those constructs and frameworks in understanding and explaining to others as well, and not just others, to us to start with.
Definitely, I need to work on with you together.
Sure. I don't know when, but yeah, I given my crazy life. But anyway,
We'll see in a
I
moment.
continue.
Yeah, Baba.
Sure. Yeah, Baba. In the state of full development in human form, mind has three bodies: mental, subtle, and gross. Sanskaras are in the mental body like a storehouse, and according to the individual sanskaras, are the three bodies. And according to the individual sanskaras, are the three bodies. The meaning of form is that the subtle body is formed according to the mental imprints, and the gross body is formed according to the subtle sanskaras. The sanskaras in the mind must be spent, they must be used, and they must manifest. To spend the sanskaras, to use them subtly through desire, the mind takes a subtle body, then the mind takes a gross body according to the subtle sanskaras. As the sanskaras, seeds must be used up both subtly through desire and grossly by action. The mind experiences its sanskaras through the mental, subtle, and gross bodies. The mind becomes empty of sanskaras after the successive experiences of the gross, subtle, and mental worlds through the gross, subtle, and mental bodies. While experiencing these three worlds, the mind uses up the sanskaras grossly in the gross world, subtly in the subtle planes, and mentally in the mental planes. But while experiencing, that is, using up these sanskaras, simultaneously new sanskaras are created and remained stored in the mind in seed form. The physical body of the mind is the means of experiencing the sanskaras, and when this physical body becomes enfeebled after using up the old sanskaras, the body drops, dies. At that time, there is the union of new sanskaras with the mind, and one is ready for new experience to use up sanskaras subtly or grossly. For this purpose, the mind takes another physical body. In this way, old sanskaras are wiped out, and as this experience occurs, new sanskaras are produced. According to the new sanskaric makeup, a new body is then taken to experience the sanskaras. As the old sanskaras are spent, the mind loses impressions and the body weakens to eventually drop off at death. I think there's a little bit of confusion created here. The physical body, and in brackets it says of the mind. I would probably say it's of the soul, small s. Right?
Basically,
So,
it is talking of sanskara. The physical body of the mind is the means of experiencing the sanskara. Physical body of the mind is the gross body.
yeah,
Does
but
it?
it's not of the mind, right? It's the corresponding physical body of the mind, but all of that is
Yeah.
the nucleus is the soul.
That's correct. But
So
in
the
the
soul.
connection to the sanskaras, it is being spoken. So it's just that
Oh,
relates
okay.
to sanskaras. Yeah.
So physical body of the corresponding mind. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And also it
Yeah.
makes a distinction between the, say, unattached status of the soul. So when you refer to
independent
the body
status, status of the soul as compared to even the mind and the body. Yeah.
Body.
Agreed. Okay, I continue.
Karthik, I just want to add, sorry, is that the unspent sanskaras are carried forward in the mind. That is why I think probably they've said, or they've made reference to the mind. And so
Of course.
that
It's
is
the
why I think,
storehouse, the receptacle. It's the one that carries the sanskaras. Yes.
Jai Baba.
Okay, Baba. As the old sanskaras are spent, the mind loses impressions and the body weakens to eventually drop off at death. However, in the process of spending the old sanskaras while alive, the new sanskaras that are produced are imprinted in the mind in seed form. By these imprints, the new sanskaric makeup of the mind forces the old physical body to drop, and a new gross body is thereby formed after the gross samskaras are somewhat equalized during the process of heaven or hell. Thus, the mind continues gathering new sanskaras and accordingly new bodies during reincarnation. The infinite intelligence in its original form of the soul, big S, without sanskaras never changes. It remains always formless. But sanskaras change, and accordingly, the human bodies change. To spend new sanskaras through the experience of birth and death is for the body and not for the soul, biggest. It has no birth or death. Rebirth is due to the sanskaras which form a subtle body. And according to the change of the subtle body in heaven or hell, the gross body changes and is joined to the subtle body when it takes birth in the gross world. The new psychic or sanskaric makeup in the mental body from the newly accumulated sanskaras from the previous life changes the subtle body while in the states of heaven or hell. And this change requires that the subtle body have a new gross body. The meaning of death in reincarnation is the changing of the old body according to the new sanskaras gathered by the mind. The meaning of birth is the taking of a new body according to these new sanskaras. The new sanskaras gathered in the present cannot be used up by the present body, as this body is suitable only for using up the new sanskaras of the previous lifetime. The death of the body is in accordance with the requirements of the new sanskaras. Death is necessary because the new sanskaras cannot be spent by the present body, as that human body was formed for spending the then new, in brackets now old, sanskaras of the previous body.
Beautiful.
Yeah, amazing.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Amazing.
Very simply explained. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Physical death. Yeah,
and
go ahead.
also, and also this impresses very clearly that what we do now is for the future. So do things with this thought, so that your journey in the spiritual path is also decided by what you do now, so that you can carry forward the same thing later. Jai
Correct,
Baba.
correct. There is a famous Vivekananda saying, what we are today is because what we did in the past. So what will be in the future is what we do today.
Yeah.
Very famous.
Wow.
This quotes.
Interesting. Great. Let me continue. Physical death and the daily sleep that human beings experience are the same states of mind. So here there's an analogy of physical death and the daily sleep, right? And then it's the same as what Bhauji is saying. I continue. No thoughts are active in deep sleep. One does not think, but one awakens in order for the mind to experience thoughts. When awakening, the mind first experiences the mental world. Ordinary man is unconscious of this. Then the subtle body experiences the subtle world. Ordinary man is unconscious of this also. When an ordinary man is completely awake, conscious, he experiences the gross world through his physical body. A mental conscious person awakens in the mental plane as a subtle conscious person awakens in the subtle plane. Once this involved consciousness becomes active, then automatically the gross body, like a shadow, becomes active. Every time the mind is in sound sleep, its experience of the mental, subtle, and gross worlds comes to a stop. But this stop is temporary. When the person awakens, again mind becomes active, that is, thinks. The mind experiences the world mentally, subtly, or grossly through the mental, subtle, or gross bodies, and it is the sanskaras that awaken the person. Every time the mind is in the dream state, semi consciousness, the gross conscious man experiences his sanskaras sub-subtly, and for the time being, gross experience is at a standstill. Every time the mind is in the state of sleep, meaning when the mind stops thinking and is inactive, the sanskaras remain in a dormant state to be experienced again in the awake state. And every time there is death, the mind goes to sleep. That is, the thinking stops and the sanskaras are temporarily left behind. Since the experiencing of the sanskaras awakens the mind, makes it conscious again, and forces it to begin thinking again. After death, the mind does not immediately awaken in a gross body, but in its subtle body. And the individual experiences gross sanskaras through his subtle body. This heaven or hell experience is according to the newly gathered sanskaras. While in the states of heaven or hell, the mind is awake, and during the experience, the good and bad sanskaras balance to some extent in the mind. I pause here, and I think the interlinking expert Ashok ji, I think we should go and update our Trello board with both heaven and hell and a bit about death to link to this, because I think the way this is explained is very simple, but very, very detailed and clear. I hope you agree.
Yes, I agree. And it's again those pages 120, 21, and 22 of Listen Humanity. Yeah, I will. I may will sit with you and understand how to do the Trello board.
No. I'm talking about the Discourses Trello board. Just go and update the Discourses Trello board
Okay.
right
Okay.
now. right now. I think the larger work, we still have to figure out how to do it. But at least if we link back these things to death and heaven and hell, this is a very, very simple and almost mathematical explanation of death and the journey of the soul.
Okay, okay.
Right? Yeah. Okay, I continue. After this, heaven
I
or
have
hell.
a doubt here.
Sure.
Can you go back and read the last paragraph?
Last paragraph. After death, the mind does not immediately awaken in a gross body, but in its subtle body. And the individual experiences gross sanskaras through his subtle body. This heaven or hell experience is according to the newly gathered sanskaras. While in the states of heaven or hell, the mind is awake, and during the experience, the good and bad sanskaras balance to some extent in the mind.
Yes, here the new sanskaras gathered is in this life. Is it correct? Experiences gross sanskaras to the subtle body. This heaven or hell experience is according to the newly gathered sanskaras. That is the sanskaras gathered in this life, and that is experienced because while we are in the gross plane alive, we do not experience the effects of these sanskaras that we gather in this life. So that is all good deeds, the effect of the good deeds, or bad deeds, the effect of the bad deeds. We don't experience while we are alive, but we experience that in the hell or the heaven state, depending on the type of sanskaras gathered. Okay, if that concept is clear, then what is that remains for the further generations?
What do you mean by further generations? Point one. And point two, I agree. I mean, first, immediate reaction, newly gathered sanskaras refer to the life just concluded. I agree with you.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But what do you mean by further generations? Further reincarnations?
Yes, further reincarnations.
Okay. Yes, that's correct.
Yes, if we are balancing out whatever we have experienced, gathered here, then it becomes nil or almost same, zero. Then what is
Correct.
that is left for the next few births and deaths that we will experience?
Nirvana.
Yeah. If you have
get out of
balanced
the
it,
routine. Yeah.
yeah, if you balance it, you go to the state of nirvana. And in
Hmm.
fact, probably you go through nirvana with a very brief state of heaven or hell, or maybe you bypass heaven or hell completely and directly go to nirvana. I don't know. But I agree with Sanjay ji. So it's basically nirvana state after, if there is no residual sanskaras after your death.
So that is what is when Baba says he has come to me. That means he has got through. I mean, the cycle has ended.
Cycle has ended. So that means I would like to say, for my own sake, add something here. We will experience the reverse of what we have done at this life. That is, if we have done, say, bad deeds, we will experience the pain of it in hell. And if we have done good deeds, the enjoyment or the happiness of that in the heaven state. But the sanskaras gathered remain, I think, so that this process of reincarnation, each time we lose these sanskaras only by experiencing while we are alive. So, but what we experience in hell or heaven is only a temporary phase.
A, it is temporary. B, it is a subtle experience which does not spend your sanskara,
Yes.
but it is only a point of replay, a point of vivification, a point of
Yes.
brief, intense, and quick recapitulation of what happened with a objective of defining the future. Both happen.
Yes.
All of these
Yes,
things
yes.
happen. Yeah.
So,
No,
during
Jeva,
the life cycle, 1 minute. During the life cycle, also we experience physical suffering, mental suffering, and all that. That's also a same kind of process which is ongoing, also. And that's what Baba has said. The more the aspirant suffers, it is good for his spiritual journey.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, Baba.
So actually, what is my point is, say the actual removal of the sanskaras is done when we are in the gross body alive. And what we do or experience in the heaven is not of producing
that is the final.
sanskara.
Yeah, that is only final analysis, actually. Summary.
Yes. Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Your assessment, your understanding is perfect. So only
I-
in the gross body can you spend up and
Yes.
exhaust sanskaras, and that's the logical justification or support for your line of thinking. Is the fact is the form is a necessary vehicle for experiencing sanskara,
Yes. Yes.
right? Which has been explained to us in the divine theme. The form, an appropriate form, which led to evolution and all of that, is a necessary condition for experience of sanskaras.
Yes. Thank you for clarity.
no, Jay Baba, I want to clarify. I think even in the heaven and hell state, depending on the balance of which sanskaras are dominant, your sanskaras in that in between stage of heaven or hell before you get the next body also are reduced, but they may not become zero. Okay, so it's not that key everything goes to a you know a standstill in the heaven or hell state. You may experience, or some of the sanskaras can get uh, consumed or reduced even in the heaven or hell state, but the intensity of the states of heaven or hell are far more intense, whether for a long term or a short term or period of time.
Okay, I beg to differ, Ashok. Maybe we have to get some literature to support this. Logic, I am on the side of what Mamaji said, which is you need the form, and this is more replay. This is more planning for the next cross body, and it's audit and accounting, right? Business is over. It's the last month. We do all the audit and accounting and decide what to and draw up the budget for the next year. That's what is happening in heaven or hell. I am not conducting business, which is I'm not dealing with sanskaras being exhausted, used up, whatever. So that's my thought. I may. So if you have literature to the contrary, it's probably good to bring that up and discuss that. It can happen offline on the group as well. No problem.
Yeah, we can have it online, but I would suggest everybody to read the chapter, The Cycle of Sleep and Waking. Again and again, I'm referring to it, but
Cycle of?
listen, humanity.
Listen,
Yes, yes.
humanity on death.
Yeah. Okay.
The Cycle of Sleep and Waking, Part 2, Chapter 2. And then probably by next week, we can discuss or we can get some clarity and focus on what we are thinking out. I'll
Yeah,
be
Baba.
I'll be glad to uh, you know correct my understanding, but this is what I understood from reading those chapters.
Sure.
Yes, that deep learning of what, say, while you are in the gross form, so you do certain actions, but you do not realize the, say, import of that action. But you keep doing it, or you do some other actions and pile up these things. But in the heaven or hell, it is a learning process, or say, as Karthik said, vivification. That is, you are in front of you, it is played out what you have done and what is the say outcome of that by way of pleasure or pain. That is what is the experience. So it is a sort of a learning process to understand what wrongs or what goods you have done in this life. But will it reduce all your sanskaras is the question. I
Which we'll
need
find out from part
yes,
two,
yes,
part
we
chapter two. Yeah, we'll find
yes,
out. So
yes.
we'll rest the question till then.
Discussion. Yeah. Yes.
We'll rest the question given Ashok's intervention. We'll consult that and decide. But we at this time we think there's only review, not exhaustion or spending up of sanskaras. But happy to read more.
Ye-
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. It's near zero, but it's not absolutely zero. It's Cheba.
It,
Okay. Sure. I continue, Jai Baba. After this heaven or hell subtle experience, the mind adopts another gross body according to the new structure of the subtle body, and this new structure of the subtle body is determined by the balancing of the good and bad sanskaras that were left behind in the mind when the person died. The similarity between sleep and death is that in both cases, the sanskaras first awaken the mind in the subtle body to either experience a dream or heaven or hell. In the sub-subtle state, while dreaming, the nature of the opposites is still there because of good and bad sanskaras. And through a person's good or bad sanskaras, he has the astral experience of a sweet dream or a nightmare. In both sleep and death states, the mind stops thinking temporarily, and sanskaras then wake up the mind to experience them subtly. In sleep state, the sanskaras wake up the mind to the subtle body, and after the experience of dream, to the gross body to experience the gross world. But in the case of death, sanskaras wake up the mind in a new physical body to experience the sanskaras grossly as the old body has been given up. Every moment, old sanskaras are being spent and replaced by new sanskaras. The experience of the mental, subtle, and the gross worlds through the mental, subtle, and gross bodies is due to the individual mind's sanskaras. In fact, the cause of the existence of bodies and worlds is nothing but sanskaras. Three worlds exist for the mind to experience sanskaras. Mind experiences gross, subtle, and mental phenomena in the three worlds through gross, subtle, and mental bodies. No experience is possible without the three types of sanskaras. In the unconscious, non thinking, deep sleep state, mental, subtle, and gross worlds are not experienced. In the beyond, there are no sanskaras. But when the man sleeps and enters this original state, the sanskaras are still there in the mind, stored, even though they are not experienced. In the state of mind, in the state of man's consciousness, false thinking, while awake or dreaming or divinely dreaming, mental, subtle, and gross worlds are experienced through mental, subtle, or gross bodies. In this situation, the sanskaras are active and they are experienced while man is awake or dreaming. In the infinite real thinking of a Sadguru, consciousness is full and infinite and therefore divine. The mental, subtle, and gross worlds are not experienced through the master's mental, subtle, and gross bodies. In this divine state, sanskaras cannot be experienced because the Sadguru has none. He has no sanskaric connection with any gross, subtle, or mental beings. And if one has no connection, one cannot experience. Although the Sadguru is above all bindings and aloof from the experience of the three worlds, he takes upon himself the sanskaras of his universal work for the benefit of the world. Prarabdha sanskaras signify his fate and destiny as Sadguru. The sanskaras he uses for universal work are Yoga Yoga sanskaras, divine free impressions. Okay, so there's an English explanation for Yoga Yoga, which is divine free impressions. And Prarabdha, I think we have not used much in Baba literature, right? So here again, the first usage, Prarabdha sanskaras signify his fate and destiny, which is pretty much, I mean, in this case, we are talking about Sadguru, but even the Vedantic reference to Prarabdha is similar, isn't it, Mamadi? It's fate and destiny, or what you carry forward, not the one you process. Okay, I'll continue.
Karthik, the word, the prarabdha sanskaras are also referred to and explained in discourses.
Discourses, yes, yes.
Yes, yes. So prarabdha samskara is the sanskara that you bring to this new world.
New body,
as the new body. Yes, yes. So the Sadguru's prarabdha samskara is to become a man and live and then
get to
do the
state.
work of a Sadguru. So that is his prarabdha sanskara. But for his universal work, he has the Yoga Yoga sanskara. That is the free, what is the term used? Free.
Divine free impressions.
Divine free impressions. Okay.
Divine free impressions. So divine impressions, but then they're also by nature free, which
Free,
means that they are not binding. His work is non-binding. So that's why divine free impressions. Or actually, it'll be better if it's free divine impressions. But it's okay. Okay. The mind's thinking, I continue. The mind's thinking an infinite number of thoughts. It's seeing in the mental planes. It's seeing, hearing, and smelling in the subtle planes. It's eating by the mouth, enjoying sex, walking, moving hands, urinating, or defecating are all due to sanskaras. This means every feeling and thought in the mental body, every desire in the subtle body, every movement of the gross body, every breath, every emotion, every happiness, every suffering, every incident is due to one thing, sanskaras. The happiness of the good sanskaras is experienced through a healthy body, and the suffering of the bad samskaras is experienced through a diseased body. This is the gross experience. The enjoyment of sanskaras is experienced through a happy mind, and the misery of sanskaras through a dejected mind. This is the subtle experience. Violence, looting, drinking, singing, fighting, and playing, doing good or bad, are according to one's sanskaras. In other words, a happy mind enjoys its sanskaras, and a miserable mind suffers because of them. A happy mind gives happiness to others, and a miserable mind inflicts suffering upon others. The enjoyment of sanskaras in the mental experience is the happiness of realizing God, the bliss of the soul, thinking infinite thoughts and feeling infinite feelings. The suffering in longing to realize God and the suffering of not being able to unite with God is the agony of the mental experience. I repeat, the suffering in longing to realize God and the suffering of not being able to unite with God is the agony of the mental experience. It is sanskaras that compel the mind to see through the mental, subtle, and gross worlds with mental, subtle, and gross eyes. It is sanskaras that force the mind to smell the subtle fragrances and gross odors through the nose of the subtle and gross bodies. It is sanskaras that oblige the mind to hear the subtle music and gross sounds through the subtle and gross ears. Sanskaras make the legs walk. 1 second. Let's put DND on. Sanskaras make the legs walk, the hands strike or write, the mouth eat or speak, and the urine and stool pass. Every experience the mind has of senses through the mental eye, through the subtle eyes, ears, and nose, and through the gross body's sensations and organs is due to nothing else but the sanskaras stored in the mind. These sanskaras stored in the mind as seeds are most finite and keep the limited mind of man from experiencing the self, the big S. Instead, man experiences these finite sanskaras infinitely through mental, subtle, and gross forms, which make up the mental, subtle, and gross worlds. To do anything, to move, to think, to desire, to breathe, to walk, to see, to smell, to hear, to speak, to eat, to fornicate, to read, and write, one must have those type of sanskaras. In every one of these movements, thoughts, desires, and actions, old sanskaras are spent and new ones take their place. In 1 second, there is an exchange of 10 million sanskaras, and without the help of a perfect master, it is impossible to be free of their bindings. The stopping of the activity of the mind occurs during deep sleep, but the mind still retains sanskaras. The real stopping of the activity of the mind is the realization of self, big S, as God. One is asleep to creation, and the mind no longer has sanskaras. Only then can one experience the soul, big S. So, again, very nice chapter, very nice explanation. And I pause here before we continue to the next chapter.
So, one question
In
which
summary,
comes
we
to
need to, continue, Mamaji.
After the question, yeah, sure.
yes, the question that comes to my mind here is, how can we find out in this, say, gross world with form, the spending of samskaras or the accumulation of new samskaras to actually know that I have added this samskara, I have lost this samskara? Can we have an exercise to know that? Is it possible or not?
Wait for heaven and hell
We-
state.
We,
Be conscious by doing intelligent action.
we,
But you cannot
we are-
really get. Yeah, go ahead, Sanjay ji.
we are the cost centers actually. We just need to spend and all that. There is an accountant
Yes.
already. We cannot be doing his job, What we call it into the Chitragupta. He's keeping everybody's account, yeah?
Yeah.
He's an accountant at God's office actually.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, Baba.
Yeah.
Yeah. Only learning on a practical life is whatever we are doing, we have to be careful. That's it.
Yes.
And we said yesterday, we don't do things which will not do in Baba's presence, or say things we will not do in his presence. So that's, I think, very simple. The tool that we have in our hand and what is in our control, right?
Yes.
So most of it, of course, we are driven by the past sanskaras, but as much as we can.
That's why Baba
That's
insists on follow me, obey me, surrender to me, and all that. Don't try to theorize or do anything like that.
Yeah.
Just follow the dictums. That is the best thing for us.
Yeah. And keep remembering me, make me your
Yes.
constant companion. All those in many ways he has said this. You know.
Yes.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. Okay, let's go to what time are we at? Okay.
Baba also,
Ordinary.
sorry,
Yeah, go
sorry.
ahead.
Baba also has said that if you take my name, it acts as a safety net and can protect you from the, it can reduce the pace of formation, or it can reduce you from uh, creating more sanskaras.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm not,
And only once in a day wholeheartedly. It's so
Yes.
simple.
yes,
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
As often as possible, if you want to remember him in the last breath.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. That's correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, ordinary. The next chapter is ordinary dream and divine dream. An ordinary gross conscious person dreams while asleep, and that dream is false and limited. The extraordinary person who has subtle or mental consciousness dreams while awake, and that dream is real and divine. In the semi conscious dream state, the mind of the ordinary man experiences through his subtle body the lower half of the first plane, the astral world. I repeat, in the semi conscious dream state, the mind of the ordinary man experiences through his subtle body the lower half of the first plane, the astral world. The ordinary person experiences only gross sanskaras while dreaming through the subtle body, and it is an astral experience. In the semi divine consciousness of the subtle or mental planes, a person experiences the state of divine dream and the mind through the subtle body, experiences the divine powers of the subtle world. I repeat, in the semi divine consciousness of the subtle or mental planes, a person experiences the state of the divine dream, and the mind through the subtle body experiences the divine powers of the subtle world. So the first distinction is you are in the first half of the first plane, which is nothing but the astral world if it's a ordinary dream. If it's a divine dream, you're in the subtle world. The subtle experience is a divine dream, and that the subtle experience is a divine dream that the subtle conscious person, yogi, experiences while awake, not while asleep. Second distinction. The yogi's dream is real in the sense that he experiences a higher degree of consciousness and power. There are varying degrees of divine experience from the first to the fourth plane. Kubera actually experiences 20% of divine consciousness by attaining infinite power. From the fifth to the sixth plane of the mental world, one experiences higher consciousness, and on the sixth plane, the Pir experiences 50% of divine consciousness by attaining complete control of the mind. The gross conscious man experiences 1% of divine consciousness when unnatural sanskaras are terminated to some extent. At both states, either gross consciousness of the average man or subtle or mental consciousness of the higher spheres, the condition of mind is of semi consciousness. But the gross conscious person's semi consciousness occurs while he is asleep, and the man of the planes is semi conscious while awake. The meaning of dream is to think in a semi conscious state, but to achieve the infinite thought, one must attain full consciousness. This is only possible while awake. But the ordinary man cannot stay awake, and the person on the subtle mental planes cannot stop dreaming while awake. The end of
Karthik,
all
you
dreams.
read that once again, Karthik.
Sure, I'll repeat. The meaning of dream is to think in a semi-conscious state, but to achieve the infinite thought, one must attain full consciousness. This is possible only while awake. But the ordinary man cannot stay awake, and the person on the subtle and mental planes cannot stop dreaming while awake. The end of all dreams, semi-consciousness, is to stay awake, fully conscious, and think the infinite. To achieve this, one must stop dreaming, stop sleeping, and stop thinking falsely. But this is impossible until one has thought an infinite number of thoughts while awake and seeing the creation. To stop thinking falsely and stay awake is the goal of infinite mind. And he who attains this state has achieved the infinite thought of the infinite mind through infinite thinking.
One thought comes to me at this point. Say the must, what we have read or known about the must, they are in the dreaming state
While awake.
While awake.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
why they are not fully realized, but they are on the way. But maybe the Sadguru and avatars work with them to make them come out of that dream and see the reality clearly.
Or move them further or help
Yes,
them in
yes.
their journey. Yes, correct.
Yes.
That's what Baba has also said about his work with musts. Yes. But yes, from what we are reading, they are obviously dreaming while awake.
While awake.
So here's a diagram. Let's just pan out to see the whole thing, and then we'll try to see it
So
closely.
basically, Jay Baba, the divine dreaming is only possible by a few people in the hierarchy.
Yeah.
Yes, those in the planes.
Those in the plane.
Those in the planes, yes. So only those in the planes. So ordinary gross conscious souls can do only two things. That 1% and even the 50% is for a peer. So that 1% example was the only experience that you will get, but that also while sleeping. What is that 1%?
That if you have already completely almost erased the unnatural sanskaras.
Good one. Perfect. Gross conscious man experiences 1% of divine consciousness when unnatural sanskaras are terminated to some extent.
Yes.
Yeah. But that's again while asleep. Oh, somebody needs to mute. Thinking, eye of the infinite mind, subtle glasses, mental glasses, gross glasses of infinite mind, gross sanskaras, seeing from inside out the mirror of creation, infinite mind's reflection, which is creation, seeing from outside in the mirror of creation, seeing infinite mind's reflection as subtle and mental creation. I think let's read, and that's explained in the chapter below, which is called thinking. So I assume it's explained in depth. Explained in detail. Thinking. Infinite intelligence in the state of thinking is the infinite mind, and the experience of infinite mind is infinite thinking. In man, mind is infinite and thinking is infinite. Yet, in the state of man, experience is infinite. Experience is finite. I'll repeat that line because I confused everybody. I start from the beginning. Infinite intelligence in the state of thinking is the infinite mind, and the experience of the infinite mind is infinite thinking. In man, mind is infinite and thinking is infinite. Yet, in the state of man, experience is finite. In the Sadguru, infinite mind is itself, which is real. It thinks of itself, which is soul. And in the state of the Sadguru, experience is infinite. So the difference is in the state of a Sadguru, the experience is infinite, and all the thinking in the state of mind in a man is infinite, but it is thinking, its experience is finite. In man exist the capabilities necessary to realize infinite mind and become the infinite thinker. In this sense, then, if man represents infinite intelligence, the eyes of man represent infinite thinking. The pupils of the eyes in the mirror represent the Om point or the Ahura point, from which all thinking begins. Man's shadow creation is the reflection that he sees through the mind while he thinks, and this shadow is the infinite mental, subtle, and gross imagination that he experiences while in the action of thinking. Maybe we just take a little peek at the diagram and come back. So, where is the pupil? Where is the gross eye? Well, I'm not very sure. Anybody wants to help me explain this from the diagram standpoint? Or we read further and then maybe it clarifies. Okay. I continue. Man sees through the eyes of the body, which is mental, subtle, or gross, which unfold the thinking process of mind. What he sees is what he is thinking, which is imagination. The man inside the mirror is bound in illusion, imprisoned in the mirror of his own limited mind. The means to break the mirror and break down the limit of the human mind is to think the infinite. And for this purpose, the process of thinking becomes infinite in man, who is the shadow of the infinite thinker. When man's eyes are closed, as before the beginning, it symbolizes the stoppage of thinking. In this condition, man has no thoughts. When man's eyes start to open, it symbolizes the beginning of the infinite action of thinking. In man, the act of thinking is in the condition of creating. When the eyes close, it symbolizes stopping the action of thinking, representing the act of thinking in the process of dissolution. While man's eyes remain open and see, he is in the state of thinking, and this represents thinking in the condition of preservation. The seeing by the eyes is thinking, the thinking in the state of experience, and for the man of gross, subtle, or mental consciousness, it is the state of experiencing creation. The seeing by the eyes of a God realized being also represents thinking, but it is real infinite thinking of the infinite divine ego that experiences the self, big S. In this state of realization, man does not experience creation, but self as the infinite without a shadow. Self again is big S. The mirror symbolizes the sanskaras that make up the mental, subtle, and gross bodies. And from inside those three bodies, from inside the mirror, man experiences the forms and worlds of imagination. Mirror reflects countless bodies, shadows, and these innumerable bodies that see and experience creation represent the act of infinite thinking by the infinite mind of the infinite intelligence. When the eyes of man remain closed, that is, when the infinite intelligence does not think, or it is in the unconscious state of deep sleep, its shadow, the imagination of the infinite intelligence, is there in man's eyes. The shadow, the imagination of infinite intelligence in man's eyes, is an infinite unconscious act of thinking in the most finite mental form. The creation is not manifest or visible. With the first opening of the eyes, the sanskaras start to move. And as they move, the impressions begin to take form. As the eyes open more, the sanskaras take fuller form. And by that form, the infinitely formless sanskaras take the most finite form. In other words, the opposite manifests as the reflection in the mirror. And as limit is the opposite of unlimited, so form is the opposite of formless. When the eyes of the infinite intelligence open, its most finite mental shadow reflection appears in the mirror, is preserved in the mirror, and is seen through the eyes in the mirror. The reflection is infinite intelligence's shadow, but infinite mind sees it as itself, and this experience of seeing is false. With the opening of the eyes, infinite intelligence gains glasses, body. And with the opening of the eyes, infinite intelligence also creates its shadow in the mirror. Actually, infinite mind does the creating, but that is without glasses as formless Ishwar. Though infinite mind cannot see its shadow without glasses, with the complete opening of the eyes, infinite intelligence puts on glasses, bodies. In the beginning of its thinking in the form of stone, infinite intelligence has the most finite glasses, as the stone's thinking is almost nil. While the most finite glasses, the eyes of infinite intelligence, see its shadow reflected in the mirror in the most finite gross form, a stone. Through less and less limited glasses, finite to less finite bodies, according to the development of evolving forms, and through developing mental, subtle, and gross bodies, infinite intelligence sees, thinks, and experiences through these less limited glasses. The eyes of the infinite mind see its shadow in the mirror in the finite and less finite gross forms. And through the infinite glasses, that is the fully developed bodies in man, the eyes see its shadow infinitely. In the human form, infinite minds, infinite eyes fully see its shadow reflected in the mirror, but it still sees it, the image, as its own self. When the eyes of infinite mind open, it sees infinitely, it thinks infinitely, but because of the mirror and the glasses, creation and body, infinite intelligence sees only the shadow of itself, which is man. When the eyes are closed, it does not see its shadow, it sees nothing. To see its own self, the infinite, the eyes of the infinite intelligence should remain open, and the mirror and glasses should be discarded. Creation and body should vanish. I'll pause here. A lot of this is, I'm still struggling with the mirror. The rest of it, I have a general understanding. I hope others who have got a better understanding can explain. If others are also in the same state, we can verbalize, and I'll continue. The open eyes in the mirror, the thinking in the mind, are nothing but infinite mental, subtle, and gross imagination. The pupils of the eyes in the mirror are in the most finite form. These pupils are infinitely reflected in the mirror, meaning out of the most finite point comes infinite creation. The eye of infinite intelligence is infinite. The opening and closing of the eye is infinite, and to see in human form is also infinite. But it is all illusory, false. When the mirror and glasses are there, because they show only the shadow. Real seeing is only possible without the mirror, because when the mirror is not there, the open eye can see its own self. Glasses are of three kinds: the gross, subtle, and mental bodies. Accordingly, the shadows are also three forms of imagination. The opening of the eyes means the beginning of thinking, and by the act of thinking, the shadow, creation, is seen, but through the eyes in the mirror. It is possible to see through the mirror, and for that, there is Bhakti Yoga. Somebody needs to mute. The meaning of Bhakti Yoga, practice of devotion, is the infinite mind losing its gross, subtle, and mental consciousness in the infinite intelligence of itself. In this yoga, infinite mind, as man, thinks of itself as separate from the infinite intelligence and worships infinite intelligence and loves it. In this yoga of devotion, the infinite mind, by tilting towards infinite intelligence and merging in it, becomes unconscious of the gross, subtle, and mental worlds and its bodies by being away, separated from creation. But the merging through devotion of the man's involved consciousness is complete only when the consciousness of creation is fully lost and awakened perfectly to its self. This means that once the merging is complete, union with divinity is achieved, and for such complete merging, the devotion or love must be complete. In other words, for man as the limited mind, to merge with God, the infinite mind, one must have complete devotion and complete love. Infinite intelligence, in its original state of beyond, was when its eyes were closed. The unconscious infinite mind, when it was not thinking, when it was sound asleep, eyes symbolize the intelligence consciously thinking. Closed eyes symbolize that mind is not thinking. And if mind does not think, it does not see. To see means to think consciously as intelligence. When infinite mind sees creation, it sees the universes as its most finite imagination, and the reflection in the mirror is its gross, subtle, and mental imagination. When infinite mind sees through the eyes of man, it sees from inside the mirror, and the most finite universe appears infinite. In man, infinite mind sees infinitely and thinks infinitely. It does not see itself infinitely or think of itself infinitely, but sees and thinks of its imagination as infinite. Ishvara is the infinite thinker. Infinite intelligence, as the creator, is in the state of infinite thinking. It is the infinite thinking that creates the universe, and in this act of infinite thinking is the creating called Brahma. When infinite intelligence is experiencing the universe, it is in the state of infinite false thinking or infinite thinking of its imagination. This infinite false thinking sustains imagination, as imagination sustains illusion, infinite thoughts. The infinite false thinking that prevails throughout evolution and involution is called Vishnu. When infinite intelligence does not think and does not sustain its imagination, the act of infinite thinking and infinite thoughts stop. The act of stopping is called Mahesha. Infinite intelligence to experience the self has to be in the state of infinite real thinking. And this state is not thinking of imagination, but infinite thinking of self with the biggest. The state of having the infinite thought of the self and experiencing real infinite thinking is the state of Shiva, the goal of Bhakti Yoga. The Bhakti Yoga worships the Sadguru as Shiva, the infinitely intelligent one, perfect infinite mind. It is in the Sadguru that the Bhakti Yogi finds infinite intelligence personified. The act of creation, preservation, and dissolution happens simultaneously, and this infinite happening is all the infinite false thinking of the limited minds in creation that are the shadows of the infinite false mind. I'll pause here and probably have one other close look at the diagram to see if it makes any more sense. So there are mental glasses, gross glasses, subtle glasses, and mental glasses. And you see through the mental glasses, you see through the mental sanskaras, you see from outside in the mirror of creation. And that's for both subtle and mental sanskaras, seeing infinite mind's reflection as subtle and mental creation. Then, if you go to the gross, it's gross sanskaras and seeing from inside out the mirror of creation because it's false. Eyes of the infinite mind and infinite mind's reflection, which is creation. Okay, but why are there three in gross? And oh, these are the three mirrors. Okay. Okay. Any thoughts? Any reactions? Okay. If there is nothing, then let me continue.
Jai Baba, continue.
Yeah. Experiencing the creation is experiencing the false thoughts that prevail. The act of experiencing is Vishnu, infinite thought. The act of Brahma is the infinite thinking, and the act of Mahesh is the thinking that stops. It is the one infinite intelligence that performs these three infinite acts when, as infinite mind, it thinks falsely. In the God-realized man, in the state of Shiva, infinite real thinking occurs, and there is no creation, no preservation, and no dissolution. Real thinking is one infinite thought, that is the thinking of the self. The Bhakti Yoga who achieves this state achieves Godhood and has the Godhead of Shiva. In the God realized man, the fulfillment of Bhakti Yoga has been achieved. All unconscious knowledge is gone. Such a person has attained in himself what he worshipped as separate, meaning he has infinite mind and infinite intelligence. In the God realized man, infinite intelligence has its eyes open in the nirvikalpa state of self experience. The seeing of the eyes is infinite, and there is no mirror before them. In nirvikalpa samadhi, infinite intelligence does not see its shadow. The mirror of false thinking created by the unconscious knowledge is gone, and there is no consciousness of creation. The self experience in Nirvikalpa Samadhi is Paramatma, infinite consciousness of knowledge. Infinite intelligence has its eyes open in the state of Ishwar, and as infinite unconsciousness is infinite, seeing is also infinite as the infinite mind. In Ishvara, there are no glasses before the eyes, that is, infinite mind cannot see its shadow and creation is not visible. So on the top, there was no glass. In the state of Ishvara, infinite unconsciousness, infinite mind creates its own shadow, which is creation, and destroys it through the process of thinking. In the state of Paramatma, infinite consciousness, infinite mind does not create or destroy its shadow, and the shadow is not seen, as Paramatma, infinite intelligence, sees itself. Infinite intelligence in the state of closed eyes sees nothing, thinks nothing, but in the state of open eyes, it sees infinitely, it thinks infinitely of itself or its creation, which is the shadow. When the eyes of infinite intelligence remain open, the act of seeing is infinite. But by the act of experiencing the creation infinitely, the act of seeing changes into seeing in a mirror. Man is seeing falsely. The infinite seeing of infinite intelligence is through one eye. The one eye of infinite mind sees through an infinite number of eyes, the eyes that see from inside the mirror. Oh. The one eye of the infinite mind is the infinite intelligence. The opening of this eye brings on Ishvara in the form of the creator Brahma. The open eye is the preserving of creation, the act of Vishnu, which is necessary so that the eye can see. The closing of the eye is the dissolving of creation, the act of Mahesh, which is necessary so the eye can see itself. The seeing of the eye is the experiencing of creation of the infinite intelligence through all eyes, minds. The mirror of the limited mind is seeing through the veil of sanskaras. The mirror is made of sanskaras, and once all sanskaras are gone, the mirror breaks, limit breaks down, and the image, which is the man, inside the mirror vanishes. Then infinite intelligence sees itself. The reflection in the mirror is creation. This reflection is the shadow of the image, which is man. Once it looks inside the mirror, To visualize this, you see your body as the image of your mind. As you look at your body, you perceive it inside the creation, your world. But that world is actually the shadow of your mind. In other words, the world you now see is the reflection of the shadow that your mind casts. The world you live in is your mirror. The instant the eye of infinite intelligence opens at the beginning of awakening, the start of the awake state, its shadow, which was there latent in the state of its closed eyes, the deep sleep state, falls on the mirror, which is the creation. The shadow falls on the mirror through the infinite mind. The shadow is preserved through the infinite intelligence in the mirror. When the shadow is preserved during the awake state, it is seen and is experienced through the veil of sanskaras. When the shadow disappears, creation dissolves and is drawn within infinite mind again by the infinite intelligence. In the most finite seed form, the eye closes. The withdrawing into itself of its own creation is the dissolving of the shadow, as in the deep sleep state when man's eyes remain closed. Therefore, when the eye of infinite intelligence is opened, its most fine shadow appears in the mirror, is preserved in the mirror, and is seen through the eye of the shadow in the mirror. Infinite mind sees only its shadow, but sees it as its own self, and this seeing is false. With the opening of the eye of its infinite mind, infinite intelligence gains spectacles, a body. In the beginning of infinite mind's seeing, it gains and sees through the most limited body, which is stone, because the mirror reflects the most finite image as the opposite of its own infiniteness. The mirror reflects the opposite limit of what of that which is seeing into the mirror, which is unlimitedness. When infinite mind sees itself inside the mirror, it sees something that is most finite, a stone. With the opening of the eye, infinite mind depicts its shadow in the mirror, but that is without glasses, and it cannot see the shadow without glasses. The shadow is fine, Brahmanda, an infinitesimal seed without a form, without a body, putting on most limited glasses, the body of a stone. The eye of infinite intelligence sees its own shadow in the most limited form in the mirror. It sees the most limited part of its whole shadow. It sees itself as if it is almost nil, practically nothing. Through less and less limited glasses, the mental, subtle, and gross bodies of species in evolution, the eye of the infinite mind sees its shadow in the mirror less and less limitedly, until it sees through the eyes of man. Through man's eyes, which were infinite glasses, the eye of infinite mind sees its shadow infinitely. Infinite intelligence sees its own complete form, human, and yet it takes the shadow to be its own self. In human form, infinite intelligence sees its full development, but this development is a shadow until it, in man, realizes its infinite mind. And just check where we are. Yeah, I think we can quickly finish this. When the eye opens, it sees. But because of the mirror and glasses, infinite mind takes the image to be its own self through the eyes of the image it sees. But what it sees is false because it is seeing from inside the mirror. When the eye is closed, infinite mind sees nothing. To see itself, the eye of infinite mind should stay open, but the mirror and glasses should disappear. In the state of the God realized man, infinite intelligence through infinite mind sees itself because the mirror and the glasses have disappeared from the mind of that man. In the human form, the eye takes different glasses, bodies, according to the types of sanskaras, and through each pair of spectacles, it can see infinite mind's complete reflection in an infinite number of aspects. Different sanskaras determine the different glasses, and every aspect of the shadow is viewed in an infinite variety of ways according to the bodies taken, thus forming the infinite panorama of creation. The shadow of the eyes that appear in the mirror is the most finite, is the most fine mental imagination, the most subtle imagination, and the most gross imagination which is contained in a point. In the eye of infinite intelligence. The point in the eye of the infinite mind is in the form of the most fine pupil and is infinitely created on the mirror through the Om point. This point called Om is the pupil point in the eye of the infinite mind, through which infinite intelligence sees and through which it thinks as infinite mind. It is the thinking of infinite intelligence that causes the reflection, the imagination, to manifest in form of creation, and what it experiences through all forms in creations is its shadow. That is the image inside the mirror. The meaning of the opening of the eye in the infinite false mind is to think. By thinking, the shadow, that is creation, manifests in the mirror of sanskaras through the eye, and the eye sees only which is before it, only that which is before it. The meaning of the opening of the eye in the real infinite mind is to think the infinite, and by thinking the infinite, the shadow disappears before the eye that sees itself. The real seeing of Prabhu Drasti, the divine eye, is only possible in the absence of the mirror and the glasses. When there is no mirror before the eye, the open eye sees itself. When the infinite mind sees the self, the fulfillment of Bhakti Yoga is attained, because infinite mind in man loses its gross, subtle, and mental consciousness, and the infinite intelligence is realized as one's own mind. We stretched a little, but I think it has also stretched my imagination, because this is a very, very tough chapter in the sense of linking it. Broadly, I understand what is being said here, but I'm not able to place it in the context of the diagram. And I think the complication is multiple levels. One is there is reference to glasses, there is reference to mirror. Which is the glass in the diagram, which is the mirror in the diagram is not clear. So this is something that we could all spend time trying to research a little bit. And those of you who make some progress should tell us about it in the next week. What are the other reactions before we wind up on this chapter?
Jay Baba, I was just wondering whether there are any further YouTube videos or something else. Somebody else has probably done anything. You can share the link, please, because I agree with you, Karthik. It is a little intriguing and not very clear.
Exactly.
thank you for confirming that
Quite
I am not alone.
complex. Quite complex for me at least. So yeah, explanation of it will be great next week.
Indeed,
the-
indeed. No, I
yeah.
think a slow read with trying to fit it into the diagram, which is the diagram is what is being referred in every page, and it's like 10 pages of it, right? I think a slow read with constant references to the diagram, and if you're able to figure out which is the glass, which is the mirror, maybe we'll be able to help all of us.
Yes, this
Namani?
figure, I was disturbed by 2 phone calls, and in between I was not able to hear you out for a few pages at least. So, but seeing the picture here, this is as good as the same picture what we have seen earlier in this book. So it is almost a reflection of the same thing.
Which is
So
the
we'll have
divine
to-
theme kind of picture.
Yes, yes. So
Yeah,
if we juxtapose these two, we may be able to understand a bit of it in more clarity, I think. So here the seeing is the process of, say, evolution and involution. So the process of
Yes.
the spiritual development is the seeing.
Seeing
And what we
of the
see
eye.
at what stage is the either the false or the real. So what we go through in the duality or the evolutionary process and the early involution is all the false seeing. And as we go through the involution higher up, we start seeing the real one, where the mirror actually tries to gradually disappear. And at the end or the 7th plane, there is no mirror. You are seeing yourself. So you are God. So that is how it is represented probably. So we'll have to say, juxtapose these two diagrams together and try to understand, I think. Jai
So
Baba.
given that the most elaborate explanation was given by you, we will rest upon your efforts and your research to present to us next week to illuminate
Okay.
on what this is.
I will try to
I
do
mean,
that. Okay.
I think all of us can read as well, but then I'm
Uh-huh.
trying to make sure at least somebody does so that we make progress.
Yes.
Karthik, please post yesterday and today's reading so we can go through it once again.
Sure, I will.
Someone like me and understand better.
Sure, I will do that today. All of us are in the same state, so don't despair.
Incidentally, this book is available with Mehen Nazar Books, if anybody is interested in the physical copy.
Okay. Online or on the
No,
book house?
On the book house, physical copy.
On the online. Okay. Oh, physical. Okay. Cool. Anything else before we wrap up? I know we are out of time. Thanks for staying back.
Okay.
Jai
Jai
Baba.
Baba.
Jai Baba. Everybody have a great week ahead, and then we look forward to seeing you next weekend.
Yeah. Jai Baba.
Just before we close.